The RSD was founded by Heinrich Himmler, pictured here on the left next to Reinhard Heydrich, on March 15, 1933. Its original title was Führer Protection Command and was renamed Reichs Security Service on August 1, 1935. Its members initially consisted of members of the Bavarian police force and were responsible for the dictator's personal security only within the borders of Bavaria. Outside Bavaria, this task was taken over by the so-called SS Begleitkommando des Führers, Führer's SS Escort Command, an initial group of 8 bodyguards. From 1935 onwards, the RSD was greatly expanded in terms of personnel as the official framework of the Führerschutzkommando, Führer Protection Command, and renamed the Reich Security Service on August 1, 1935. After the Nazi seizure of power in 1933, Obersalzberg was increasingly converted into a second seat of government. In order to guarantee the safety of Hitler and his state guests at Obersalzberg, Reichsleiter Martin Bormann accommodated the Reich Security Service and the security personnel of the Führer's restricted area at the Hotel Zum Tuerken, which was located directly above the Berghof. Hans Rattenhuber was head of the Reich Security Service throughout its entire existence. After Hitler's suicide on April 30, 1945, Rattenhuber remained in the Führer's bunker until May 1st, after which he was taken prisoner by the Soviets. The Hotel Zum Tuerken housed, among others, the Reich Security Service responsible for Hitler's personal protection, and at times also members of the SS and the Gestapo. During the bombing of Obersalzberg on May 25, 1945, the building, which was located in the immediate vicinity of Hitler's Berghof, was severely damaged. Although the former owners were able to obtain restitution of the building immediately after the collapse, looting could not be prevented. It was not until early 1949 that the owners regained possession of their property. It was renovated and reopened as a guest house. At the beginning of 2021, the hotel was sold to a local business family, and the future use of the property is currently unclear.
With Hitler's seizure of power in 1933, Berchtesgaden and especially the Obersalzberg quickly became a political place of pilgrimage. The number of pilgrims ranged from several hundred to 5,000 per day who wanted to see their leader, at least from a distance. The Gasthof Zum Tuerken, situated directly above Hitler's estate, became the most popular beer garden with a view of the Reich Chancellor's residence. Although the business of the innkeeper of the Hotel Zum Tuerken, Karl Schuster, flourished as never before, there were more and more quarrels between the SA and SS people and the members of the Reich Security Service with the owner. Moreover, Schuster did not appear to be very accessible in the eyes of his neighbor Hitler when he wanted to acquire a part of the adjacent meadow to expand the Berghof area. Thereby, the pilgrims could be pushed further down the street away from Hitler's house. In fact, Schuster did not sell and only gave permission to Hitler to use the property. A few weeks later, there was another heated exchange of words between the host of the Hotel Zum Tuerken and members of the SA and SS, in which Schuster literally said, "Is there nothing left here but blacks and browns? It's like living in a prison." These words were to be the downfall of Schuster. The NSDAP local group immediately imposed a boycott of the Gasthof Zum Tuerken. A short time later, Bormann was informed of the incident, and shortly afterwards he forced the sale of Schuster's estate for 165,000 Reichsmark. Due to further difficulties in the negotiation, Schuster was briefly sent to the Dachau concentration camp for a short period of time. When Rudolf Hess, as the deputy of the Fuhrer, was given more and more duties by the party, Martin Bormann began his unstoppable rise to become Hitler's secretary and tried with all means at his disposal to make himself more and more indispensable to his Fuhrer. His adjutant at the time remembers,
Bormann ist ein wichtiger Mann. War ein
he was an extremely ambitious man.
Der ist ja
That was until the end of his political career, secretary to the Fuhrer and staff leader to Hess.
Stellvertreter oder Sekretär des Führers brachte und bis zum Stabsleiter bei Hess.
It was an extremely high position. This he accomplished on the basis of his qualification and ambitions. But without hesitation, he eliminated people who made him uncomfortable. In my opinion, he prevented the Gauleiters and other high personalities from coming close to the Fuhrer.
Gauleiter und andere hohe Persönlichkeiten in die Nähe des Führers kamen oder zum Bericht beim Führer
or from reporting to the Fuhrer. He only let through the most important news. And that was an easy task because during the war, the Fuhrer was busy with military affairs. So for these tasks, he always liked to listen to Bormann, who gave him a condensed version of it, like a personal assistant.
Für diese Aufgaben immer gern den Bormann hörte, der ihm das komprimiert vortrug, wie ein persönlicher Referent.
And I think Bormann took advantage of that too, because he said, the Fuhrer wishes this, the Fuhrer wishes that. Who could check that?
Der Führer wünscht, das ist der Auftrag des Führers und so.
In that respect, he was the gray eminence.
Die graue Eminenz.
In contrast to many other estates on the Obersalzberg, Bormann did not have the Gasthof Zum Tuerken demolished, but converted the building and used it as accommodation for the Reichs Security Service, or abbreviated RSD. Whenever Hitler was present at Obersalzberg, the Personal Protection Command under the brigade leader, Rattenhuber, was also quartered at the Turken. One of the most important pillars of Bormann's power was his disposal of Hitler's private assets and his trusteeship for the NSDAP in the purchase of the Obersalzberg real estates. With the establishment of the administration Obersalzberg by Bormann, no local authority had any insight into what was happening on the mountain. In 1934, it was still relatively quiet on the Obersalzberg. These old views show that the old buildings were still preserved up to that time. A letter from Martin Bormann to the NSDAP historian Frederick Wolfhard sheds a little more light on the mysterious forced expropriations and severance payments that began in 1935 on Obersalzberg. Here, Bormann writes, among other things, when the Fuhrer wanted to work in peace or hold meetings, the Volksgenossen stood at the fence that surrounded, at that time, the relatively small Haus Walkenfeld and shouted in chorus, "We want to see our Fuhrer. We want to see our Fuhrer." Even in bad weather, curious or enthusiastic members of the national community stood at the fence or in the yard around the Haus Walkenfeld and tried to see the Fuhrer with binoculars. For the first time, it became clear to me how necessary it was to guarantee more tranquility and relaxation for the Fuhrer on the Obersalzberg. After repeated and even more urgent requests, the Fuhrer allowed me to settle these intolerable conditions, and now, in 1935, I began to buy piece by piece, property by property. Since the Fuhrer had forbidden me any coercive measures against the owners, I unfortunately had to pay outrageous prices. The farmers earned very well from the tourism that the Fuhrer's presence attracted to Obersalzberg, while before 1933, they were almost entirely heavily in debt. They, therefore, demanded outrageous prices for abandoning their small gold mines. To be able to carry out the designs of the Obersalzberg, I had to have all the old houses on the Obersalzberg demolished. All in all, There were probably more than 50. The demolitions were carried out with the greatest possible pace to spare the Fuhrer the ugly sight of the demolitions. Drawn Bormann. Very often, exceptionally high offers tempted some private owners to sell. Others, however, whose property was connected with centuries of family tradition, were nevertheless reluctant to leave their homestead. Hitler's former house administrators recollect. People used to call him the Lord of the Obersalzberg, but we called him Napoleon. There was a famous movie at that time called Napoleon is to be blamed for everything, and we blame Bormann for all the inconveniences. He is to be blamed for everything, the accusations. He was pretty brutal in those days, although people were paid an unbelievable amount of money for those days. I was completely speechless. You know, I come from East Prussia, from the agricultural side of the country. For these amounts, an East Prussian would have acquired the largest, most elegant manor. I was sick and tired of him throwing around all that money. It was only later in this respect that I discovered it, also through Bormann. He was the one who brought up the case. He told me, you know, the Fuhrer personally ordered it. If people have to move away by his order or by ours, then we must compensate them for the loss of their homesteads. And that was the case, wasn't it? That was taken into account. I didn't know that before, and then I accepted it. Of course, if you force people to move away from here, you have to pay something. We, the East Prussians, got nothing. We were thrown out. So these were the first meetings with Bormann. All I know is that they were all handsomely rewarded. Everyone got beautiful estates in Berchtesgaden or the surrounding areas. They were worth at least 10 times the value of their small houses. They were just mountain farmers, nothing more. They had nothing. Yes, some of them were expropriated.